I could buy an entire building with just a nod, but that night, I was just a guy bringing an apple pie to meet my girlfriend's family. Immediately, I was met with open disdain and contempt for my seemingly humble appearance. But a few days later, they heard my name announced as the CEO. Welcome to Reddit Stories. This is the place where we share real stories from anonymous Reddit users. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. That's the first thing you should know. When Emily told me she wanted me to meet her parents, I agreed. Not because I was ready, but because I loved her. We've been dating for almost a year, and even though I kept a low profile, she loved me for who I was. Or at least, I hope she did. So, I pulled up their family suburban home in my old Ford pickup. Faded blue paint, one cracked headlight. I wore jeans, a plain navy shirt, and brought along a homemade apple pie I'd baked that morning. Simple, honest. That was the vibe I wanted to give. Emily greeted me at the door with that nervous smile I'd come to adore. You look casual, she whispered, adjusting the collar of my shirt. You said it was just dinner. I smiled. She didn't argue, but her eyes, they flickered with worry. Then came the introductions. Her father, Rick Sanders, a former Navy officer turned insurance broker, shook my hand with that firm, silent grip that said, "I'm watching you." Her mother, Linda, smiled wide, but only with her lips. Her eyes scanned me like a barcode. My clothes, my shoes, the truck parked in their driveway, and her younger brother, Jason, didn't even stand up from the couch, just looked me up and down and said, "Sup?" That was a start. Over dinner, I tried to keep the conversation light. Talked about the weather, football, even brought up a few books I'd read recently. But everything I said seemed to land with a dull thud. Rick nodded without really listening. Linda kept pushing food around her plate, asking Emily passive-aggressive questions like, "So, how serious is this?" Then it came. "So, Liam," Linda said, setting down her wine glass, "what do you do exactly?" Emily froze. I cleared my throat. "I'm working on a few hands-on projects right now, keeping things flexible." That was technically true. I was managing multiple startup acquisitions under my investment group. But I wasn't about to say that, not tonight. Rick raised an eyebrow. "Hands-on? Like construction?" Jason snorted. "Damn. Mom, didn't you say I'm used to date a guy who was pre-med?" The table went silent. I just smiled. "That's right. But I find working with my hands keeps me grounded." Rick chuckled. "Well, as long as you're not planning to mooch off my daughter, I suppose." Emily gasped. "Dad." "It's okay," I said, still smiling. "I can take a few jabs." But inside, yeah, that stung. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't some broke drifter chasing odd jobs. I was Liam Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Innovations, a tech firm that had just closed a $50 million deal last quarter. But I wasn't ready to tell them that. Not yet. I needed to see how far this would go, who they really were when they thought I had nothing. And trust me, they didn't disappoint. After dinner, Emily offered to help her mom clean up. I insisted on taking the dishes, hoping to show I wasn't above helping out. As I stood at the sink, scrubbing plates, I overheard Linda in the hallway, her voice sharp but hushed. "Emily, be honest. Is this really who you see yourself building a future with? A guy who brings pie instead of wine and doesn't even own a decent shirt?" Emily whispered something back I couldn't hear, but it didn't matter. The message was loud and clear. A few minutes later, Rick joined me in the kitchen. He handed me another plate, then leaned casually against the counter. "You know," he began, "Emily's always been drawn to strays. I thought she'd outgrow it." I looked at him, plate still in my hand, water running over my fingers. I didn't realize being genuine made me a stray. Rick smirked. "It's not about being genuine, Liam. It's about being realistic. Love is sweet, but security, that's what lasts." I nodded slowly. "Then I guess I'm the wrong kind of secure." He didn't reply, just walked away. Back in the living room, Jason was now watching some action movie at full volume. When I passed by, he looked up and grinned. "Hey man, you need a job?" My friend's uncle runs a tire shop. They're hiring. I didn't even blink. I'll keep that in mind. Emily caught my eye from across the room. She looked so small, so embarrassed. Her eyes apologized for what her family wouldn't say out loud. On the ride home, she was quiet. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "They're just old school." I nodded. "I get it. They want the best for you." She turned to me. "You are the best for me." And I believed her. But that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, one question kept looping in my mind. Would she still feel the same if she knew who I really was? I'd been hiding behind the simple guy image for almost a year. No designer suits, no private driver, no flashy restaurants. Just us, just me. But now I was starting to wonder, was I protecting myself from gold diggers, or was I running from something deeper? Because tonight wasn't just about being looked down on. It was about how easy it was for them to do it. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. 3 weeks passed. Emily and I didn't talk much about that dinner. She tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But the way she flinched every time her phone lit up with a text from her mom, yeah, it was still eating at her. Meanwhile, I went back to work like nothing ever happened. Meetings, strategy sessions, negotiations. I wore suits again. I signed papers worth more money than her family had probably seen in 10 years. But every time I saw her, just her in her sweatpants, hair in a bun, sipping coffee and smiling at me, I remembered why I kept it all hidden in the first place. Then one day, she walked into my apartment with a fancy little envelope in her hand. "This came in the mail at my parents' house," she said, tossing it on the table. I picked it up. It was embossed, gold-trimmed, expensive. I opened it. "You are cordially invited to the Greater City Business Gala." I raised an eyebrow. "My dad's been bragging for weeks about this," she said, sitting down. "Some huge tech investor is making an appearance. Word is, the guy's a total ghost. No public photos, no interviews. But he's apparently the reason half the companies in this city stayed afloat during COVID." I chuckled. Sounds mysterious. "Yeah," she sighed. "Anyway, my dad pulled some strings and got our family on the guest list. I wasn't going to go, but they asked if I'd bring you. That caught me off guard. They want me there?" I asked, genuinely curious. She nodded. "Well, my mom said it might be good for you to see how real professionals network." Ouch! I looked at her. "And what do you want?" She reached over and took my hand. "I want to walk into that room with you. Just us. No judging. No comments. Just me and the guy I love." I smiled. "Then we'll go." But inside, I knew exactly who the ghost investor was. Me. And suddenly the game changed. For months, I played small, hidden who I was, let them write me off. But now they were about to walk into my world, on my turf, surrounded by people who shook my hand and returned my calls. And I wasn't going to brag. I wasn't going to humiliate them, but I was going to let the truth speak for itself. Loud, clear, undeniable. Because sometimes the best revenge is letting people watch you shine. The night of the gala, I didn't wear anything flashy. Just a tailored black suit, classic watch, and a quiet confidence I'd learned to carry over years of building an empire from scratch. Emily looked stunning in a deep emerald dress. Her eyes sparkled when she saw me. "You clean up nice," she teased. "You're not so bad yourself." I smiled. When we arrived at the venue, her parents were already there. Her dad in a tux, her mom in some high-end knockoff trying to pass for couture. Jason tagged along too, somehow looking bored and judgmental at the same time. Linda looked me up and down the second we approached. "Well," she said, forcing a tight smile, "at least you shaved." Emily squeezed my hand, trying to silently apologize. We were ushered into a massive ballroom, glass chandeliers, string quartet, champagne towers. Her family looked around, clearly impressed but trying not to show it. "This is what real success looks like," Rick whispered to his wife. I almost laughed. An hour in, the lights dimmed and a spotlight hit the stage. A hush fell over the room as the host took the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Please welcome the man behind the curtain, the investor who made tonight's success possible, Mr. Liam Carter. Silence. I stood up from our table. Emily blinked. Wait, what? Her parents turned to me in confusion. Jason choked on his drink, and I walked to the stage, each step slow, measured, until I stood at the podium, looking out over a sea of stunned faces. But all I could focus on was a table where Linda Sanders looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Rick's mouth hung slightly open, and Emily, she just stared, not angry, not embarrassed, just speechless. I began to speak. Most of you know me only through balance sheets or silent partnerships. But I started with nothing, slept in my car, was told I'd never be good enough, that I didn't look the part. I paused, eyes locking with Linda's. And maybe that's the point. Maybe success doesn't look like anything in particular. Maybe it's the quiet ones, the underestimated, the ones you wouldn't give a second glance. The room was dead silent. I ended my speech and walked back to the table. Emily was the first to stand. She didn't say a word, just threw her arms around me. Her parents? Still frozen. I looked Rick in the eye, calm as ever. You were right, sir, I said. Security does matter. Then I turned to Linda. And thank you for reminding me why I never leave with my wallet. She said nothing, not a word, but her face said everything. The car ride home was quiet. Not tense, just full. Emily sat beside me, still processing. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes kept flicking toward me, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she looked away too long. So, she finally said, that whole time, the pie, the truck, the jeans, that was all on purpose? I nodded, not to trick you, to protect myself. She let out a shaky laugh. You're the ghost investor, the Liam Carter. And I didn't even know. I wanted you to fall for me, not for what I had. She turned to me fully now, eyes glistening. I did. I know, I said softly. That's the only reason this still matters. When we got to her place, her parents were already waiting on the porch like some awkward intervention. Liam, Rick began, his voice strangely measured. We owe you an apology. Linda nodded, but couldn't quite meet my eyes. We didn't know we were wrong. I looked at them both, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. You weren't wrong because you didn't know, I said. You were wrong because you assumed. Rick shifted uncomfortably. Well, people have to be careful, you know? Emily is our only daughter. And yet, I said, you cared more about her being with someone rich than someone kind. No one spoke. Then Emily stepped forward. I'm moving out, she said. Her mom's eyes widened. Emily, don't be ridiculous. I'm not, she said, voice calm but firm. I need space to live my own life, make my own choices. Rick looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. She turned to me. Can I stay with you for a while? I smiled. I was hoping you would. 6 months later, we bought a small house just outside the city. Nothing extravagant, just warm, real. Her family still sent the occasional message, checking in, thinking of you, hope you're well. But the dynamic had changed. Respect isn't given freely anymore. It's earned. And as for me, I never stopped driving that beat-up blue truck. Still, keep it parked beside the Tesla in our driveway, because it reminds me of who I was when the world thought I was no one, and how sweet it felt when they finally saw the truth. Welcome to Reddit Stories, and thank you for listening to a true tale, shared by someone anonymous, but deeply real. See you in the next story.